Thanks for tuning in. I'm Craig Lieberman, and I've been tinkering on cars since 1980. I've owned more than 40 cars in my life. Some were heroes, some were zeros. But never in my wildest dreams would I ever guess that 3 of my cars would go on to star in a motion picture franchise. My Supra, my GTR, and my Maxima all had starring roles in Universal's Fast and Furious movies. Over the next 3 years, I'd served Universal as a technical advisor. I helped choose the cars, procure the parts, oversee their builds, and support both production and post-production. I've got some great stories to tell, and that's why I created this channel. I hope you like the video. Welcome back, everybody. Craig Lieberman. Here we go. With the Fast franchise coming up on its 20th anniversary, one thing has certainly been consistent: cool cars. Every movie has had some cool cars. While of course there's a strong argument to be made about the fact that the franchise has moved away from focusing primarily on the cars, there's no denying the fact that the movies continue to showcase some amazing cars. As a global audience grew, and as the movie plots took us to different corners of the world, audiences have still been treated to a showcase of diversity in the cars that we have seen. We've had American cars, Japanese classics, Swedish, French, Italian exotics, and even the odd supercar from the United Arab Emirates. But something has been largely missing. British classics, where are they? Where are the Astons? Where are the Jags? It's ridiculous to think that the entire franchise would focus on just American muscle cars or Japanese classics, and so I, for one, have to agree that the movies still hold great appeal to those who appreciate any and all cool cars. But again, where have the British cars been? Like so many other true car fans, while I personally own a Japanese sports car, it doesn't really mean that I don't appreciate Holdens or Falcons or hot hatches, classic muscle cars, and believe it or not, British cars. In fact, Great Britain has given the world many innovations throughout history. The magnifying glass, radar, the electromagnet, fish and chips, the Supermarine Spitfire, and a bevy of amazing cars. As for the Great British cars, there have been many. Aston Martin DBs, the Jaguar E-Type, and pretty much every McLaren ever produced. So for this video, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite cars in the entire series, the Ford Escort RS1600. And before anyone sends me hate mail saying that the Escort was built in Europe, you need to know that Escort production started at the Halewood plant in England during the closing months of 1967, I think it was. And of course, Cosworth is very British and has been since its start in 1958. Every bit of the Escort is British. The Escort didn't come to the United States until about 1981 as a replacement for the much-hated Ford Pinto. And I didn't think much of them at first, but it was in the early 80s that I learned about their rally racing heritage, and then I was hooked. The fact that rally racing is one of the greatest forms of motorsports in the world made me respect the men and the machines of rally racing even from a very early age. Originally offered with a tiny 1.1 or 1.3 liter low compression, low horsepower engine, these cars became more popular as gasoline's prices started to rise in the 1970s. And while they were thought of as economical and reliable basic modes of transport among most people, sports car fans didn't really take them seriously at first. But serious racers realized that the car weighed only 1,800 pounds, and with the right engine, an Escort could be a lot of fun and very competitive in motorsports. So what happened? Around 1969, Cosworth released a 1.6 liter twin-cam BDA 4-cylinder engine with dual side draft Weber carburetors. And this engine was based on Ford's iron Kent block, made about 113 horsepower in a car that weighed, again, 1,800 pounds. And it gave the Escort RS1600 a very competitive power-to-weight ratio. Once these engines found their way into these race cars, cars like the blistered-fendered Escort RS1600 and its big brother, the RS2000, were just killing it in the rally races around the world and started racking up the victories. In fact, watching Roger Clark score 40 victories, mostly thanks to the Ford Escort, was one of my fondest early memories of rally racing. As I mentioned earlier, Americans didn't get to see an Escort on our shores until 1981, probably because Americans were still in love with our gas-guzzling V8s back then. And by the time these cars landed on our shores, they were front-wheel drive, hatchback grocery getters, and as such, they were never really a hit in this country. It was too bad, too, because they came from a great racing heritage. In fact, I bet that many Americans had no idea what it was the first time they saw this car in Fast 6. So why do you put a car that was never sold in the United States into a movie franchise that was created in the United States? Simple answer: global appeal. The producers know that these movies have a global audience. Each movie has been a showcase of classic, exotic, or memorable cars from somewhere around the world, and sooner or later you're going to get to this car. But making uninformed audiences appreciate the greatness of the Escort was not going to be easy. For starters, it was certainly no easy task to acquire and build cars that were never sold here or built here. So how do you do it? You go to the source. Dennis McCarthy's production team sourced 5 of the right-hand drive RS1600s and then had them completely rebuilt in a British shop. Go right to the source. The cars were completely stripped down to the bare metal shells for their restoration. New roll cages were going to be installed and a pair of racing seats thrown in for good measure. That's all it really needed. The stock instrument panel was tossed in favor of a black panel housing Revotech gauges, and most of the standard switchgear was replaced by individual switches for things like the fuel pump, the starter, the ignition, that sort of thing, and just as it would have been done in the proper rally cars. To get that period correct look, the cars are sitting on 13-inch by 7-inch Compomotive Mini Light replica wheels shod with 205 60-13 tires. They were Federal 595 tires. Once the cars were ready for their big scene, they were shipped off to the Canary Islands where the scene was to be filmed. An interesting side note here, the Spanish government let them blow up pretty much anything the producers wanted to, and a lot of preparation went into this sequence. In fact, I could probably do a whole video on it. Multiple angles, multiple days, multiple cars crushed, and of course lots of explosions. The whole jump sequence probably deserves its own video, but the highlights are interesting enough. A real tank was used, a British Chieftain leftover from World War II, and it served as the base platform, and the special effects team in the 2nd unit modified the tank even further. The fact that the tank weighed 120,000 pounds made crushing cars pretty easy. And while CG was also used, the cars getting crushed by the tank was absolutely real. For the jump of the Escort though, that was done using multiple shots and angles, and if you watch the sequence in 4K and in slow motion, you can just make out a stunt driver wearing a helmet in the first part of the jump. Of course, the actual big launch was done using no driver. A second smaller jump was done which actually had a stunt driver. Again, the sequence was put together using multiple different shots from multiple different angles. 2 Escorts were used to film the jump scene. One ended up on its roof and was destroyed, and although this particular car landed on its wheels, it was a mangled mess and it would remain that way for years. They just didn't do anything with the car. Stuffed it off to the side and basically forgot about it. But eventually the little Escort RS1600 was purchased by a collector, and the new owner spent 70,000 pounds to completely restore the car. The goal was to repair and restore the car, erasing any sign of the abuse it sustained during filming, and I think they did an amazing job. The spec list of that rebuild was absolutely impressive, to say the least. While one of these restored cars was sold to the folks over at Chrome Cars in Germany back in 2019, it still resides there, and we know that at least one other is still floating around reportedly. It's still owned by Universal. Fortunately, Fast 6 gave this very deserving car another moment of glory, and it reminded audiences that not every car in the Fast franchise needs to be a shiny new exotic car. The old-timers can still show the newcomers a thing or two. Because after all, experience and treachery trumps youth and exuberance every time. Thanks for watching, everyone, and don't forget to check out my other videos. And if you feel like it, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe. Until next time, drive fast and take chances.